We are back, and it's a quick turnaround to our midweek home fixture. It's Coventry versus Millwall. Let's get to it. Well, a much-needed win for Coventry and our first of 2026. With the chasing pack putting the pressure on, Lampard's men shook off their New Year's hangover to secure all 3 points. A tale of two halves. First half we looked wide open and very vulnerable on transitions. Second half we looked a completely different team, more hungry, more direct, and enough to bag us the much-needed win. And to top it off, a much-needed goal for this man, and we can hope that puts the voodoo behind him and more goals to follow. However, a tough fixture awaits. Millwall come into this game undefeated in their last 5 league games and against some tough opposition too. In Ipswich, Southampton, Bristol, Swansea and Watford, it's no surprise that they find themselves in 4th spot. There's plenty to play for the remainder of the season, and a mention of automatics isn't too far a stretch for them. Last time out, Millwall fell to a pretty hefty defeat and surprising 4-0 at the Den, typically a place that's tough to grind out results. Millwall dominated the possession throughout, however a clinical showing with fast quick breaks helped Coventry ease to 3 points. Whilst I'm sure all Cov fans are hoping for another repeat, I can't help but feel we'll see a totally different game on Tuesday night. So, straight into it. Millwall play a 4-2-3-1 and have found good success with their strong wing play, notably Aziz and Ballo working well on either flank. They've got good options from the bench as well in forward areas, however their treatment table is a touch lengthy at the moment and they'll be hoping to see some faces return soon. Looking at their last game versus Watford, a 2-0 away win. Average position wise you can see that 4-2-3-1 structure is in place, however interestingly you'll notice this block of 4 here, 2 central defenders and 2 central midfielders behind the halfway line, with the wing backs in very advanced positions. This is particularly interesting considering they had less possession during this game at 44%. Now, we'll look into their pass map here and you'll see they typically build from deeper positions and use longer style passes into the final third and are more direct in nature. Their possession average for this season is 45.8%, which puts them 20th position in the league, so they're quite happy to be without the ball. When we look at their pass accuracy, well, it's one of the worst in the leagues. On initial inspection, you perhaps think it's from wasteful passing, however it does stem from their direct nature, always being forward thinking with more riskier passing on those longer balls. This next graphic will be somewhat more telling when we can see the unsuccessful passes and just how many there are. You can see how direct they are, looking to put their physicality to the test. They're top 3 in the league for long passes, and that's also reflected in completing some of the fewest short-range passing in the league as well. If we look back at Millwall's last few games, they've had less possession in nearly all of them and come away with some good results. In fact, the last time that they were the more dominant team possession-wise, well, they lost. I'm not saying it's a trend, but it's something we saw in our away fixture too, when with the ball for large parts, they lost their ability to hurt on transition and ended up being caught themselves. Looking at their heat map, that kind of confirms their average positions with higher dominance within that defensive build-up and down the wings and lower percentages in those attacking areas where we're likely to see less successful passes and more aerial battles. So let's take a look at how Millwall like to play. Firstly, they're a very physical team and that ties into their play style and, well, they're not an easy team to play against. Setting up in that 4-2-3-1 formation, without the ball they'll look to squeeze opposition and put them under pressure at all times. It's led from the front and either Ivanovic or Coburn presses aggressively and they're supported from deeper positions as well. When pressing, they'll form more of a 4-4-2 to cover more space in the opposition's half. A snapshot here from the game versus Swansea, who are a very good ball-playing team actually. It's a relentless press late in the game from a goal kick, but you can see how squeezed in Swansea are. They tried to play the ball out, and as we can see in the next frame, the press has meant there's no options but to go long, and it's immediately collected by the Millwall defender, and they stride forward once again. If the press is bypassed, they'll drop into more of a 4-5-1 structure where they can be more compact and difficult to break down, particularly through those central areas. With the Millwall team often looking to press high and forward thinking, they often have one defender step high to mitigate threats of balls into the opposition strikers and cover space for roaming midfielders. The other defender will stay in deeper positions to cover space in behind. This works well for them to win the ball back quickly and keep teams stuck from breaking out. However, with second phase transitions, they can often be caught out with runners from deep, quick flicks and passes catching them out. Once the press is beaten, it can leave players out of position and lacking structure. We saw that in the away fixture, how quick transitions mixed with pacey attacks can leave them very open defensively. I've got a snapshot here of their recent Swansea game just to illustrate this. The midfield looking to press high, a dink pass in behind, and there's a lot of space in between the midfield and the defence to roam free there. That said, even when caught, Millwall don't make it easy and are happy to break the game up and make it difficult for teams to settle. They actually commit the most fouls per match, so it can be a bit of a disjointed game. Looking at overall defensive stats, Millwall are in the top end for interceptions per match, tackles per match, clearances per match, and possession won in the final third. It's a key part of their game, that physicality coming through, and it just highlights their forward, high pressing style. XG conceded wise, they're intense, so whilst they are a tough team to break down, we should still be expecting some chances in this game. With the ball, Millwall tend to be direct in nature, not ones to play with it at the back, but instead constantly looking forward. Everything about Millwall's game looks to push them high up the pitch and keep pressure on teams both with and without the ball. The build-up will often come from down the wings, with wingers being supported by fullbacks. The idea here is to create options down the wings to drive balls into the box using their strong physicality to turn it into chances. Millwall sit top in terms of crosses into the box, so it's certainly a focus point for them. To make things more dangerous, Millwall have won the most aerial duels in the Championship this season. Now granted, this isn't just for attackers and as a team, but it does highlight their strength in the air throughout the pitch. Things can often turn scrappy, but don't get it wrong, Millwall have technical quality in the team, so can create space in tight areas when the ball does drop. We mentioned Millwall's physicality. Well, a lot of their attacks start from these transitions. Millwall can often use their strong ground and aerial duels to win the ball back in unpredictable and vulnerable areas. And again, when they're shaping up against high-line defences, they can cause some real problems. We saw Millwall catch Watford out with this in their second goal, winning the aerial duels. It bouncing around, it falls to the Millwall player, and a quick ball in behind, and they're through on to score. Finally, I'll just comment on Millwall's ability at set pieces. They scored joint third most in the Championship this season, where they can use their physical presence to force the ball over the line, and it's certainly a watch out. In times gone by, Millwall are often coined a strong team that's hard to beat, but they're much more than that this season. They offer a genuine threat moving forward, sitting in 8th for expected goals, so they can clearly create chances. That said, when we look at goals per match, their finishing isn't quite up to standard, sitting in 16th for goals per match. Now over to Coventry. Last out, we were sticking with our preferred 4-2-3-1 formation, and as we say, a very open first half and a much improved second. We'll touch on a few positives and negatives in a second. However, moving into Millwall, well, we're not expecting anything to change formation-wise. However, possibly for a first time we can say on these videos, we have options to bring in off the bench. With it being a quick turnaround, I would expect some changes to come in, just to keep things fresh. Now, I think we may see Hadji Wright's start. Finally broke his curse, is well suited to this sort of game where there's space in behind to run onto those balls, and he also managed to score 2 goals in the reverse fixture, so he'll certainly be on Millwall's radar. I'm unsure on SA starting against his former club. He looked very good against Leicester with some moments of magic, but it did look a touch tired in those last few minutes of the game, so it may not be featuring from the off. Sakamoto is a good shout, however last out versus Millwall he did struggle to get going with the physical nature of the game and it kind of shut him out. We saw with Kane Keza-Hayden coming on as a replacement and we saw the damage his pace did to that right hand side. I'd be open to potentially starting Min Hyuk Yang, purely for his pace at this point. We don't really know how he'll stack up against the more physical opposition however. Now looking back into that Leicester game, in the first half we suffered with being cut open far too many times and it results back to what we discussed within the match preview. We let players drift in between the defence and the midfield time and time again, left unmarked, so when we are pressed the ball was far too easy to bypass into those attacking areas. It also allowed that free player to make runs in behind which aren't easily tracked, and we saw balls going down that left hand side time and time again. If you watch back that first half, you can see James for Leicester being given far too much space in behind and drifting. Second half, that was addressed, and well, Leicester found it very hard to find the balls out of defensive positions. James ended up resulting going into less effective, wider and deeper positions to find the ball. And whilst they had the opportunity, their threat was much less, and we were able to build from that. First half we also saw Leicester squeezing us into deeper positions, whereas the second half we offered much more of a threat in behind with balls over the top. This prevented the defence from clustering the space our midfield were looking to operate in, and more space led to more opportunities. I think when we look ahead to the Millwall game, there's a different game at hand. There's certainly an argument to sit back and be more compact, let Millwall come forward and then hit them on the counter. It was an effective strategy when we played them in the away fixture, however, I sense at home we will be in control of the possession. I'd still like to see more protection within that midfield, particularly with a longer ball style approach from Millwall. You'd fancy Kitching, Latty and even Wolfenden in a physical aerial battle, however we need to ensure that the defence is well protected with those drop downs. Now, Millwall's quality down the flanks do offer a threat, however Milan and De Silva should be able to withstand this. As always, it's one to watch out for staying narrow and allowing balls to come in, and also pressing with runners, drifting wide from midfield, is going to give them the opportunities to get those balls into the box, something we're going to look to prevent. Now, much like Millwall, Coventry too offer a fairly aggressive press and a high defensive line, so it can be quite a back and forth game. Now, with the ball, I expect Coventry to have the quality to be able to withstand that Millwall press, and I think we've certainly got the pace to get in behind that defence, so don't be surprised to see some longer balls as outlets when the press gets too much. Expect to see plenty of wing play, which will start with lots of width and then cutting inside to drive towards goal further up. I'm expecting more of a direct version of Coventry versus the slower style build-up we've seen in previous weeks. Now into key players. We're going for Coventry's Haji Wright. Now I know he's been out of favour recently, but I just feel his presence in behind the defence will cause them issues. I can see him starting. Honourable mention to Mason Clark, however, he has been fantastic recently. For Millwall, I'm going for Aziz, tricky off that right hand side, good with the ball, offers plenty of threat and even scored in his last match. So now into predictions. I think we're going to see Millwall come out of the blocks first and look to press really aggressively from the off. And it will all be down to how well Coventry can withstand it. If we can mitigate that threat and put the press at bay, I think the game will settle fairly quickly. For Millwall, expect plenty of longer balls to their forwards and progression down the wings. Coventry will match up with a more direct style of play, plenty of wing play and balls over the top to run onto. This is a tough game for both sides, and the game will be decided within transitions of the game, and it could come down to fine margins. The match plot model is going for a generous 3-1 win. However, now from a personal perspective, I can see a fully fit Coventry being well up for a 3-1 and having the quality to step up, but as always with a midweek game, it could come down to those fine margins and energy levels, and with Millwall's physical nature, 1-1 feels likely to me, but I have to stick to my model. 3-1 it is. You tell me what you think it is. Until next time, cheers!